All right, welcome in to another episode of Debate Night. We are back. I am back in. I am back in real time. This is an episode that isn't taking place in the past, I guess, to those watching. So that'll be nice. We're going to go over everything that went down at DDO this past weekend. Talk about some of the exciting things that popped up. Today we have just three cast members. One had to jump out last second, so we have three today. We have Brody coming to us from Iowa.
Yeah, another huge city, Indianola. I don't even know if I said that right. Indianola.
Just a massive hub. We also
W-
have Steven joining us as well.
Early again, but here I am, 6 a.m. West Coast time, baby. Let's get
Yeah,
it.
back in West Coast time where I left him, and Matthew is joining us today as well.
How's it going, guys? Pleasure to be
Uh,
back.
yeah, so we're going to hop right into it today. We're going to start with a little bit of FPO from DDO, starting with Holyn Handley. So this is an interesting topic. I saw some debate about this on Twitter. Not we get these topics a lot, but this one was pretty in your face, and we're talking about spit outs. Holyn Handley had some vicious spit outs during that final round, with the worst one coming on hole 14 on a birdie look. Obviously, ultimately, she lost the event. She lost into a playoff. So a lot of people do that math in their head. Some people don't like that argument because they say, well, there's a lot of golf to play after. But some people can say, well, listen, that costs her the tournament ultimately if that goes in. There's two sides of the fence there. So the question is that a invalid argument when there's golf to play after, or are those spit outs something that we need to be like talking about more? Like, hey, these just can't happen. They're unacceptable. What's the thought here, Brody? What do you think?
Yeah, I think ideally from a player's standpoint, you want to have a basket that is as consistent as possible. That's I think what everyone's looking for is if you know, if you putt and the disc hits a certain way and it catches 99.9% of the time, we would like that to be more like 100%. When it comes to baskets, though, when I guess what ends up happening is I think it goes back to what we were talking about earlier about how some people think, they have a spit out when in fact it was just high left or it was too much hyzer on the right hand side and it gets pushed out. The ones that are tough are the ones that are like directly center and they just kind of go in and then go out,
Yeah.
Um, but I would say like any sort of shot like that, obviously it's easy for people to look at it and be like, "Oh, that's how they lost." But, it's a 3-round tournament. There's tons and tons of shots that I'm sure Holland would have loved to have back. I think it's just always going to be if something down the stretch like that happens, people are always going to look at that as, "Oh, that is the reason." But yeah, the baskets we got to find a solution that just doesn't make good putts miss, I guess. Or I
Yeah.
guess great putts, I guess
Yeah.
would be a better. Good putts, I'm okay with it being 50-50, but great putts need to probably make the basket every time.
Yeah. Fair enough. Because that putt on 14, I mean, tough to find issue with it. Steven, what do you think? Okay.
So before I get into the spit outs, hole 16 is what caused Holland to lose. Okay. It wasn't her spit outs. It was hole 16. She missed the island the first go around. She ended up with a bogey. They finally get to a playoff. What'd she do? She throws the exact same shot with the expectation of a different result. You can't do that. Blast it into the back wall. You have that power. Like there's no reason for you not to at least cross land up there at some point. And, if you bounce off the cage or whatever, so be it. Fine. But hole 16 caused her to lose. Now the spit outs, in my opinion, even hole 14, if you look at it, she's putting downhill. It's a little bit higher in the chain, so you leave room for it to come back out. It was on hyzer coming downhill a little bit high. There's room for it to spit out. It was close to being a perfect putt, but it wasn't a perfect putt. If it was a perfect putt, it'd be in the bottom of the basket. Now, and I think the narrative with spit outs in a hole is, in my opinion, a little bit ridiculous. I understand it from a player's point of view, and they will always have an argument until the Pro Tour has one basket for every single tournament that they use. And at that point, once you have that one single basket and you start having spit outs like real bad, then you can have a real discussion at that point. But all the players will have the same basket to practice on, to play on, and will know what to expect heading in. And so I think the conversation of spit outs will die at that point.
Yeah, certainly a step in the right direction. Matthew, what do you think? Does spit outs cost her the event?
I'm gonna say kind of. So my big note for the whole day is gonna be momentum. You're gonna hear me talk about it in a lot of these other instances, and that exists here. When I was watching, she seemed pretty good at shaking that off. Us, I mean, 14 was tough. I think everyone can admit that, but momentum is that important part. She mentioned in herself in an interview that she felt like she just wasn't throwing the disc well. And her caddy told her, he said, "Hey, you were like shorting this. I don't know why." And this was for a lot of holes. So like this wasn't just okay if she missed those two. She was like, I think it was 14, 15, 16, obviously. I've watched Holyn throw like a million times. I think Holland's the best. But I can agree with Steven here. 16, a lot of the time was just like, I feel like you could have thrown it so much farther and just accepted the par. Like the one she watched, I think it was Kristen throw in the water, and then someone else get really close, and then she turned around and still decided to run for that play. And it's like, well, that's your game. If you're confident in your game, go for it. But from what was it sounding like, you weren't confident in your game, so much so that your caddy had to have a serious discussion with you about how you're not throwing the disc well.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. I mean, yeah, certainly it was interesting to see her line up that shot after it not working the first time. And there wasn't really any wind out there on that island. That's where I was really confused. Heiser just seemed so simple. There might have been a little right to left, but not a ton. My one follow question, you, Steven, with the baskets is if the sweet spot on a basket is so precise, because I mean, like if the putt on 14 is a little high, and we talk about that a lot. Well, we find a lot of excuses for putts that spit out, right? So we talk
Sure.
about like it was a little right, it was a little high. If the sweet spot is so small for a putt that goes in 100% of the time, and everywhere else in the chains is a percentage play, do baskets just need to be really tiny?
I mean, I wouldn't necessarily be opposed to it. I think that, if you're talking about making the game more difficult, if you're talking about making putting harder, then, going to the training basket, that's the, you know,
Yeah.
what do you want ultimately? And I think that, I, I wouldn't necessarily be opposed to seeing it. I think Brody might have a different opinion than that, being a player. But I think if the Pro Tour can just get a singular basket for the entire tour, and this is a point that most podcasts, most news outlets have talked about, I
Yeah.
think that that's the goal.
Yeah.
Get to a point where it's a singular basket,
Yeah.
and then you
It
can't have any more complaints.
Yeah, it can't be long because you're right. I mean, everybody would at least know a lot more about how one basket interacts with their putters and be able to learn off of that. That would certainly help. Yeah, it's a very tough one for Holyn Handley, but easy to argue that there were plenty of other mistakes. It's a long tournament. It's just tough when they happen down the stretch. Certainly.
Yeah, I get it.
Each of our analysts with 2 points headed into our next subject. Talking about Haley King. So Haley King taking down the win, shown some more consistent play this season. Haley King, for it seems like the last 3 years, has been treated as a how good could she be type of player. Like, oh man, if Haley King can just string it together, hit her ceiling, she's going to be the best ever. Because you see the athleticism in her throwing, you see these flashes of greatness. So my question is she still that kind of player, or has she finally settled into a consistent norm this season and hit a ceiling that we should expect going forward? Is this the Haley King that we're just going to see from now on? Steven, what do you think?
No, I think that she is still the how good could she be player at this point in time. In my opinion, I think before she gets to a plateau, we're going to need to see her kind of reach that peak on a consistent basis. I want to see her on the podium for more than a couple tournaments in a row. I want to see her in a place where she's winning 2, 3, 4 pro tour or major events throughout a season, because she has the tools that are needed in order to accomplish that. She has every single physical tool and every throw that you could want. The problem with her is going to continue to be her mental lapses. We saw it with that upshot, that forehand upshot that she threw right into the OB. It like fell out of her hand, and you can't have that coming down the stretch in any kind of tournament. And so, you know, remove those unforced errors, and Haley King has the physical tools to be Kristen level good. And I think that's not an over exaggeration. She has that skill set. And so, have we seen her reach the ceiling yet? No. I think that if she kind of progresses through that mental side of things, we're going to see a player that could be like the Kristen that we're talking about today's game.
Yeah. All right, so Steven's still singing the same tune of years past, waiting for the ceiling. What do you think, Matthew? Is that still the case?
Yeah, it absolutely is. I will say this for every single player who is relatively young on tour, and Haley King is pretty young. We don't know what that is. When I was looking, I was trying to understand, like, everyone's singing this, Haley King could be amazing, and then looking at her performances, like, why is that? And the only thing that I saw was, like, from tournament to tournament, what she like messes up on, we could say, changes. And I think that's the kind of the mental game Steven was talking about. But I think it's also consistency. She is a young player. She is definitely. If I was in her shoes, I'd be pretty nervous as far as this goes. She's not settled into that like consistent routine, but we see glimpses of like really good play, like this weekend. And like even if you look at other tournaments where she didn't play well, parts of her game were so good. It just wasn't that whole thing. So I think as she settles in, I think as the mental stuff kind of works its way down, and as she gets more consistent with stuff like that, she talked about she was working with Bradley Williams a little bit on she felt like she couldn't throw flat, like tiny little things that are coming up and continuing to come up that kind of drop her play down just a little bit.
Yeah, and you're right. Age is certainly still on her side. There's a lot of time to form a golf career. Just ask Kristen Tatar. I mean, she took her quite a while, but then now here she is. Brody, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I think I agree with the how good could she be argument of people still having questions about that because when you do watch her play, if you're not looking at her scores and you're just simply seeing how she throws a forehand and how she throws a backhand, just the eye test and how she putts, she's very impressive in comparison to some of the FPO players that are finishing high up on the leaderboard. She's actually had a decent season, I would say, this year. I just kind of looked. She's kind of been sneaky, like up there, fifth at Waco, sixth at Vegas, a third at Champions Cup, a second at Jonesboro, and sixth at OTB, and now taking down the win at DDO. Obviously making top tens isn't as impressive just with the field size for some of these events, but she's not having like some, did get 23rd and 11th, both at Music City and the Open at Austin. But um, I think she's in the next tier down. So I don't think she's up where Kristen Tatar is. And then I would say probably under Kristen Tatar, I'm going to probably leave out a few names, but I would probably put like Paige real close to the Kristen. We haven't really seen Kristen and Paige go head to head in recent memory. I think we're all still waiting for that to go down when they're both clicking and seeing who can take it on top. But I think she is right there, and she's like just a little bit higher than like a Holyn Handley and an Ellen Hansen in the sense of that she does know how to win. She has won coming down the stretch, and we've seen Ella and Holyn multiple times now put themselves in contention, and for whatever reason, just not able to actually win. But yeah, I mean, I think all of us are rooting for more consistent play from Haley to be towards the top of the leaderboard, pushing for wins and not having, some of these tournaments where it's just like, wait, where is she? Why is she not, somewhat close to the top?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely more consistency, like you mentioned, with those pretty good finishes this year. We know that she knows how to win. Um, it's just one of those players where it's every year like, oh, if she can just pull it together, fix this or that. At some point, when does that just become that is who the player is? When, like you mentioned, Matthew, when age is on their side, it's not really fair to draw that conclusion when they could have 10 years left in their career.
Yeah.
So it is definitely difficult, but I think she's found a lot more success now, and I certainly see her getting more wins this season, certainly. So we're going to move on to the MPO side. Right now, Brody and Steven each have 4 points, Matthew at 3. Parker Welk, what a story. So, we're watching this guy who just seems unbeatable out there on the final day, taking down the best player in the world. And slowly the information, if you hadn't known about Parker Welk, which a lot of people didn't, I'm sure, the information slowly starts coming from the booth where they're like, yeah, he's never really done much on tour, and he's only rated 10-10, which was like a shock to me. And then he's like in his mid 20s, so it's not like he's just some teenager either. So my question is, being rated just 10-10, taking down a huge pro tour event and besting the number 1 player in the world, is that the best underdog story the pro tour has ever seen? What do you think, Matthew?
Heck yes, it is. I mean, what else can you ask for? This is like the perfect setup. Everyone online is just looking this kid up after the fact, just like, hey, where has this guy been? What is he doing? We're seeing this style of play, and it kind of, looking at other finishes he's had, it kind of helps that story. 43rd at Vegas, 41 at Austin, 52 at Texas State, 98th at Music City. Like, he was out there, but the best underdog story ever doesn't matter that he was in 98th a while ago. He was in first yesterday. That is so cool to talk about. And it just makes so much conversation, both for people talking about the tournament and after the fact. And there's just so much stuff that it's a nice story you can wrap up in a bow and just talk about and present to really anyone. And whether they're inside of disc golf or out, and they still have an awesome time, like, hearing about that. I thought it was I thought it was so cool. I was just watching everything he was doing, and he had some hilarious interviews as well after the fact. So I think it made it kind of a perfect underdog story there.
Yeah, definitely like pretty endearing personality as well. Seemed like a really cool guy, and that always adds to it. But yeah, it was pretty sick. Brody, do you think it was the best underdog story we've seen?
I mean, I'm no historian when it comes to disc golf, so I would be the worst person to ask this. I mean, I don't. A name that kind of pops out to me is like James Conrad winning Worlds, right? Where he takes down Paul Macbeth, who is like looks to be in control and on his way to adding just another world title, and James just kind of comes out of nowhere and takes it down. I don't know if that it kind of has like a different vibe than this one. But just looking at his statistics over the final round alone, he was 89% circle 1X, 80% circle 2 putting. I did see kind of the highlight package of him playing. He was just going for every shot. And when you're in that kind of feeling that you can't do anything wrong, and on a course that is as attackable as Emporia Country Club, you can just see the confidence that he had. The fact that he went for eagle on that par 5, where a lot of players just played that hole for chip, 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 birdie. You can just see that he was having the confidence to just go for it, and that was exciting to see. I think, again, people are going to make a big fuss over the rating system. Me, I hate ratings. I think the world ranking was kind of interesting, him being outside the top 100 and winning. But I think it's just showing again that, like Evan Smith was up there. We've seen his name pop up once or twice. There's guys that are just popping up and just kind of fading off and not actually getting the wins. He was the first one, I would say, this season that kind of popped off and took it down. Like we saw Silas Schultz almost do it at Champions Cup. There are players that I would say aren't known superstars yet in disc golf that are just popping off, and they're showing that we're getting to the stage where it's not just this guy or this guy can win. It's go down the leaderboard. There's a lot of people that have a lot of chances, and disc golf, it's so interesting because it's such an easy sport in the grand scheme of things that just like if you just change this much, you feel like you could win. And just to give like my own personal antidote of the weekend, going into the week, I felt very confident that I could win this tournament. And leaving the tournament, you look at where I am on the leaderboard and you're like, holy cow, you weren't even close. But in my mind, I'm like, I was just like a few things. I
Just
needed to
like
get a few
it's those
things
quadruple
here.
bogeys, man.
Well, I mean, that's that was that was two poor shots, right? Two
Yeah.
poor shots gave me a quad. I made a triple twice. But in my mind, there was so many good shots. I would say like 95% of my throws were very, very good. So leaving that tournament, I'm just thinking in my head, like, man, if I can just get that 5% cleaned up. And I'm sure there's tons of people that were even closer to win this tournament that are thinking in their heads, man, if I just made this putt here, if I would have not messed this up shot. And I think that just shows that this is kind of where we're getting at. There are more and more players that can win these tournaments,
Very true.
and it's very exciting.
Very true. And I think we've already thought that way about like, oh, anybody in the top 40 could win, but seeing somebody outside the top 100 just opens that to a new depth where there's this whole new list of players that I'm like, that means because this happened, that guy could win. And I think I knew that, but I just hadn't had it confirmed like this. Steven, what do you think?
Mhm.
So I think that it's difficult to call this the best underdog story ever because you have to take into account the kind of gravitas of the tournament, what it means. It's not a major, it's an elite series. And if it was a silver, then if it was Hunter, we wouldn't be talking about it at all ever. So if we look at the performance on a one tournament basis, take away the gravitas, then I would say so. The Pro Tour itself, maybe not the history of disc golf, but the Pro Tour, this is one of the best underdog stories we have ever seen. Parker's a killer, but he's never even won an A tier before this. Like, what? you,
Yeah.
you played 104 events ever. You've only won 4, and then you come out and you take down an elite series against the best player in the world going shot for shot. His energy on the course, his attitude towards the game, that celebration after he hit the eagle, like, I want to see that in disc golf. And this story and the way that he came about winning, it makes you feel good, and that's what gets people invested emotionally in the game and in these players.
Yeah, very good. I think it's very much PGA Tour vibes when we're talking about field depth at this point, where you could watch any guy on any given day who's playing well and be like, "This is the best golfer I've ever seen in my life." Like that's the where we're at now. Is like if you were watching Parker Welk yesterday, you were like, "This guy's unbeatable. He does it. He has every shot. He doesn't miss." And that's where we're at now. If somebody's having their weekend, our field is deep enough that you're not going to be like, oh well, they're not that good. Like you have to be that good and you have to play that good to win.
And I was just gonna add on. This also was this style of course was a very very much no decision making kind of style of course. When the wind, this is coming from someone that last year played this course, and I think I almost shot about the same this year as last year. And last year we were playing in 40-mile-per-hour winds. This year we were playing in no wind, and the decision making is just gone when there's no wind out there.
Yeah.
It's literally who can just execute the shots better.
Yeah.
And ultimately, that's probably what disc golf is. I'm starting to come to a realization that's what disc golf is when we don't have wind. It's very hard to find a course that has the decision making when you're not in the woods, obviously.
Yeah.
And Parker, like you said, yesterday was a clear indicator that his game was firing on all cylinders. And so he never had that. That's the one thing that like it would have been interesting to see. The only game times decision I would say was like going for the eagle on 14. That was like the only decision he really had to make coming down the stretch. Other than that, it's literally just execute the shot, execute the shot, execute the shot, and he was.
Very true.
He just wasn't messing up.
I've always said the ECC is like a disguised, pedal a foot on the gas course because it looks like there'd be a lot of decision making because of the presence of OB, but when there's no wind, the landing zones are pretty much the same. Like you throw the shot, then you throw the shot. And everybody kind of plays it a similar way. Um, definitely kind of how that course ends up. Yeah. I mean, no doubt there was a lot of confidence for Parker. I mean, throwing that Annie Stahl backhand on 16 in the final round is
Dirty.
just nuts.
I want to know if he did that all 3 rounds.
I think so. I think they said he had gone with it round 2 at least. Just a nuts line,
What?
but I mean,
Yeah, I don't know what the
he just must be comfortable. Those prodigy players love those putter flex shots. They love it.
Yep.
So I'm thinking that's like Gannon Bird likes that shot too, and it was just working. So we're gonna continue on this, and the next question here is: was Parker Welk's performance a flash in the pan, or is there a reason to expect more from him going forward? Because man, his game looked so good going into that last round that you almost have to ask the question, Brody, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it would be, obviously it doesn't, like, if you look at kind of his season so far, it doesn't bode for, like, continued excellence of this. Oh, he's just going to be the favorite to win the next tournament. He did mention in his post conference or his post interview after winning that like UDisc had given him like a less than 1% chance of winning, and he felt disrespectful. I don't think that is probably what you should give someone that's 2 shots off the lead. However, it probably is, there is probably some math that goes involved of why it was so low. We'll see. I think winning does have an impact. Like it could change and definitely, boost his confidence and move forward. These next couple tournaments, Des Moines is a very similar kind of style course, as well as, Preserve. So it'll be very, curious to kind of see how he does on these next 2 events. But yeah, I mean, it's winning is tough. It's very, very difficult right now to win consistently. So I don't think he should kind of put that pressure on himself to like get back into the winner's circle, but to see him continue to kind of have success and maybe get a top 20 in these next couple events or a top 10, I think that would bode well for him in the future.
Yeah, the win is definitely that unknown variable. What will that do for a player? Steven, what do you think?
So I think if we have to answer the question now, it's flash in the pan because his body of work, I was talking about it earlier. He's never won an A tier. So like you have to look at that and then think, well, he put it together for one weekend. That's great. Let's see him do it again. And so he has all the tools. He has the big forehand. He has a serviceable, if not, great backhand, and he's a killer on the putting green when he needs to be, especially in circle 2. In the clutch, he went 4 for 5 in circle 2 in the final round. I mean, that was huge. So he has the tools needed in order to, be great on the pro tour. But as of right now, there's 50 other guys at least that have the tools to be great on the pro tour. And so as we move more and more and more to this golf-esque field, you're going to see guys pop off and then not even sniff the top 10 for the next 5 tournaments. And so it's difficult at this point to say anything, but if we can see him string together a few top 20s in a row, then I'll feel more comfortable saying, okay, Parker's here. He's ready to play, and he's gonna be more than just that one win pony, coming into next season.
Yeah, fair enough. Let's see the body of work. Absolutely. Matthew, what do you think? Is it a fluke?
Let's talk about the difference here. There are a lot of guys who think they can be winning. But what if you knew it for a fact? Like, what if you knew with a shadow of a doubt that you can go out and beat everyone else there like he just did, Now, I will agree, body of work is not great, and I'm not expecting him to pop off with a top 5 next week or something like that. But anytime someone gets a win, I will never count them out from then on out because they know they can win. That's the most important part there. And I think this is going to be consistent from across the entire thing we were just talking about with Steven. Not only are you going to have to worry about the top 20 players when you go to a tournament, you're going to have to worry about the guy having the weekend of his life that is so low rated, you don't even know he exists now. And one of those just won, and now he knows he can win. So, flash in the pan for him, it might be. I would, like I said, let's see how it keeps moving. But we now know this is that momentum thing I'm talking about. I guarantee we're going to see more and more players doing that. They just watched Parker do it. They're looking around. They're like, I've played against him a couple times. He's pretty good. Maybe I can have the weekend of my life. And it's
Yeah.
just going to repeat and go like crazy for all those. Like, there's just no way to stop it now. I think it's such a cool piece of the puzzle to add in now. But I would be curious. I'm hopeful that Parker stays around for a little longer and does some cool stuff with that.
It is so true. That must be like a huge confidence boost for the lower end of the field to be like, hey, I'm higher rated than him, or I've beat him so many times. Like it can be done. And you're right. I mean, the benefit and in your mind and in your confidence of winning an event, even just so that the next time if you do get in contention, knowing, hey, I've been here before, I've done this, it's not nearly as much pressure. Because like, think about the difference if you're Parker Welk the next time. The difference between, oh my goodness, this might be my only chance to win ever. This could be a lifetime achievement, or hey, I've done this before. This would just be another win. It's a very different scenario in the amount of pressure you're going to be applying to yourself, and going to be interesting to see how that goes forward.
I want to add one point too. That's
Okay.
just an interesting contrast between, now obviously Adam played Zootown Open prior to this tournament, but I played with Adam yesterday, the final round with you, and we were talking a little bit about how we've always struggled at Country Club, and in the past, DDO was half the rounds are at Country Club, the other half are at Jones, and we played better at Jones, and we'd come to Country Club and not play that well. Interesting contrast because Adam goes out, wins Portland, comes, struggles at DDO. Parker goes out to Portland, misses the cut, comes to DDO and wins. So again, I think there are some players that will their talents or skills or whatever might show a little bit more on other courses. And then, you have the upper echelon players, and they are upper echelon because their game just goes from tournament to tournament. And that's like a Calvin Heimberg, right? It doesn't matter what the style of course is. If he's playing well, he's going to be in contention. And it'll just be interesting to see kind of, now that Parker has this win, how his game translates moving forward into some of these other events. I mean, European Open is a tournament that's kind of, USCDC, another one kind of the same style. And if the wind is down, again, when the wind is down, it's like the guys that are just executing their game and playing the best, those are the guys that are kind of towards the top of the leaderboard.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. We got a few more topics in the rapid fire round about Parker that we'll get to. First, got to do our elimination. Steven and Brody with 10 and 8 points respectively moving on. Matthew just 1 point off the pace. Very close. It was very close this week, but we'll be sitting out our final rapid fire round. See if Brody can scrape back a few points. This time we actually have a leader, so I don't have to make anybody pick a number here. So, Steven, you have the choice as we head into our rapid fire round.
I want to go first.
He wants the box, wants to go first. All right. So, first subject here. It's going to be is it actually a big deal? Is it actually a big deal? Parker Welk jumping 73 spots to world number 39 after just one great performance.
It's a big deal because it shows the deficiency of that particular ranking system. No player after one performance should jump up 73 spots in the world ranking, in my opinion. He has not proven that he's a top 40 player on tour at this point in time. He has proved that he can put up a performance like that. But there needs to be more consistency before somebody moves up that far. I mean, as Brody can attest, he's been pushing and pushing and pushing to increase his world ranking, and it's kind of working over time, and he's moved up. But you can't just play one event, beat all these guys, and then go, oh, you know what, this guy's a top 40 player now. It doesn't work like that. You just can't do that. I think that the algorithm for that particular world ranking needs to be updated a little bit before we start taking it seriously and making it a big deal.
Yeah, Brody, what do you think about that system?
See, I took this question as like, yeah, that is a big deal. I think
Different ways to
Terry.
take at it.
Yeah, I think Terry mentioned at the end that this win secured his tour card. I would love to see winning also on tour, like securing a few other things. I think like the points that he's going to acquire should definitely help him get into the playoffs and potentially the tour championship as well. I think now he's for sure guaranteed in the Champions Cup as well with the win. I would love to see a couple other things obviously come with that. I think winning on tour, maybe you should get like 2 years, because ideally, if you win on tour, or not ideally, but if you win on tour, you're probably going to attain the points needed, unless you like literally play no events, to get your tour card for next season already. So I think it would be nice if you went on tour, they were like, hey, the next 2 seasons you're locked in. So that way, if you do have a poor next season, you're already good to go the year after that. I'm actually okay with him moving up that many spots. I think guys that are further down the list, they're going to move up obviously a lot more spots if they actually do win. This also was a really good field. The competition there was really strong. There weren't that many players, besides maybe the Kyle Klein, Eagle, those type of guys. Paul, those guys weren't in the field, but other than that, pretty much everyone was there, and he beat everyone. So I'm okay with him obviously moving up to that spot. The world rankings are kind of the weird system in some situations, but if you win on tour, I'm completely fine. Even if your other events are trash, I'll be the first to say I much rather would have a season where I'm trash at every event and I have one win on tour than being like okay at a bunch. So I think it matters. Winning matters a lot. His name is now etched in history of the Disc Golf Pro Tour. No one will ever forget his name as a past winner, and he has that moving forward.
Fair enough. I mean, there's definitely something to be said for the fact that like, anybody in those lower slots also has the opportunity to jump if they do win. But and it does. It's always like, how do you look at the world rankings, right? Because like if you try to look at them as like a real interpretation of who's the best, it is difficult to be like, man, is he really better than all those guys that finish more consistently than him just because he got one win? But it'll be an ongoing discussion, as we all know. That's just kind of how things are. So, into the next topic, Stephen was still a 1 point lead. This is actually, I believe, Stephen, you're the one that actually gave the idea for this topic.
Nope.
It wasn't
it was
Stephen,
somebody else.
It might have been Tyler then.
Tyler.
Okay, well, you won't
Don't
have
want
as
to take
much of an
credit.
advantage. You won't have as much of an advantage then. But we kind of saw two different entertainment packages in disc golf this week. We saw FPO, where we have a lot of known players that were all in a really good battle in FPO, which we don't always see that in FPO. A lot of times we just see Kristen pulling away, realistically. But we saw a lot of really good players that were battling, throwing clutch shots down the stretch, making an interesting product there. So we kind of saw, and that's what we see in MPO a lot. So we saw that kind of storyline versus MPO this week. We got to see this somewhat unknown player like having this underdog story, beating out the number one player in the world for the win. So my question is, which do you think is more entertaining for the viewers, that battle between known favorites or the unknown challenger taking on the superstar? Brody, what do you think?
I think it's like a case by case basis, because I look at how I view, because it's tough because I'm obviously playing in disc golf, so I kind of like look at how I view other sports. And when you look at, let's say, the U.S. Open just happened, and you had Wyndham Clark winning it at the end. I think a lot of us probably would have liked to see maybe Rory and Scotty be a little bit, and Ricky kind of coming down to the wire, and we kind of got Wyndham Clark versus Rory, and that's all we got. I don't know how many people enjoyed that. I definitely would have enjoyed more seeing Ricky versus Rory down the stretch. Then you look at like March Madness. That's one where sometimes the underdog story, like, I just remember like Davidson with Steph Curry, like that. I was rooting the crap out of Davidson. Like I wanted to see how far they could go. And maybe it's one of those where it's just like some players are going to catch your eye and you're going to be drawn to them. And I think the way that disc golf currently is packaged, it's very hard for like a Parker Welk, for example, to get like a crazy amount. Because I mean, if the PGA Tour struggles to do it, like US Open, really struggled at making me want to root for Wyndham Clark. And so if they can't do it, I'm not really giving that much guff, I guess, on the Disc Golf Pro Tour to be able to do it. But like March Madness, they know how to do it, right? Like when you have what was it, Florida Gulf Coast, when they were having their run, like people Dunk City, right? Like, or was it yeah, it was Dunk
Yeah.
City. Like
Yep.
people were going nuts on that, and they're able to build that kind of underdog story through the tournament. It's harder to do in like the individual sport kind of tournament style one day after the next. So me personally, I love seeing like the superstars, the world number 1 versus world number 2 coming down the stretch. That's
Okay.
me, but I could see some people liking the underdog story more.
Okay, Steven, what do you think?
So yeah, I'm definitely on the other side of the fence on this one. But before I jump into that, I really quickly just want to say the lack of spectators made this feel like a silver event from a viewer standpoint. So I think
It
we all
wasn't
lost
good.
on that one. Yeah, it was not good. Now, I do see the allure from both sides. 1 versus 2, two juggernauts, duking it out, I think is great. But for me, and what I talked about earlier, and I think that part of this is because me personally, I've seen Parker kind of move up in the ranks of just like the MPO field from his local scene, so a little more connection than most. But from an underdog story, the emotion that you get from a guy that comes in or a team that comes in and beats the number 1 after having virtually no opportunity or no shot when it comes to percentages, that makes you feel something. And from Brody's standpoint, the March Madness, they have time to build that. It's harder to build it over the course of the tournament. But I think from Parker, you received that through some of his post-round interviews, and you kind of had a look behind the scenes. And so that makes you more invested. So from a viewing standpoint, I like the David versus Goliath. I like the underdog story. And I will always be more driven towards that as a viewer than I would, number 1 versus number 2.
Can I add
Sure.
something to that real
Sure.
quick?
Sure.
So the 2 times that I saw like the highlights that he made that really big putt on hole 9, I believe to save par, and then did like that parkour jump through the tree,
Yeah.
and then his eagle putt on hole 14. Both of those are like not good spectator holes. The spectators are really far away. Hole 14, it's actually really even hard to see
Sure.
depending on where you are to even see the basket. And yes, the crowd size out there was dismal. It was, or abysmal. I think
Yeah,
both words can be used.
Both. Yeah, both.
Wasn't good. So it's unfortunate that like those 2 big shots, like no one really got to. We didn't get that crowd like roar, and
Yeah.
that's tough. And then crap. I had a question for. Oh, you were talking about the interviews. Do we know? I didn't watch the live that much yet, so
Sure.
he wasn't filmed at all round 1.
No, it was round 2 and round.
No interview round 1. Was there an interview pre or post round 2?
I believe there was post round 2, and I'd have to go back and check. But I'm probably.
So they interviewed
Yeah.
Parker being 2 shots back. They didn't interview.
Well, because he
they
was
didn't
on lead
interview-
card.
I know, but after the round, they didn't interview the leader. They interviewed Parker.
Well, of course they did. No, they did interview the
They
leader.
did multiple.
Yeah,
lead-
because they have
Okay.
Tournament Central now, so they do multiple interviews. It's not just the
Gotcha.
leader
Okay.
after the round. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think to your point of saying like March Madness, you
With
win.
time.
Granted, like first round, second round are kind of right back to back. But if you win first round and second round, then you have a little bit more time to kind of build up the story going into the Sweet 16.
And it's also,
The
I think,
Parker
with
thing, it's like you for first day is just over.
yeah,
Like
right.
no one,
No
so
time.
you literally have the end of day 2 to day 3, and that's it to
I think-
build a story. You have like 12 hours.
I think it's because the Pro Tour has a little bit more like closeness with the players than the PGA Tour does. And I think the Pro Tour does a good job of getting to know their players on a more personal level, especially when, they are a little bit more of a tight knit community as opposed to the PGA Tour and how big and grand it is.
There's definitely a better chance of a pro tour commentator like personally knowing some of the
Yeah.
players' stories, I guess. I think Brody, you said it it's with the underdog story, it's a lot of times if they catch your eye, that's where it becomes very much person to person. Anytime you have an
Yeah.
underdog, like Parker, for example, there'll be some people that are like, oh my gosh, I just like even when I watch golf, whenever there is an underdog threatening to upset a favorite, and especially in golf when like you cheer for a lot of the favorites a lot of times, like, oh, I like Rory, or I like Isaac Robinson, and I like Eagle McMahon or whatever. If that for that underdog to be rooted for, they have to catch your eye, and you have to start to kind of buy into like, oh, that's a good guy, I'd like to see him win. Like,
Yeah.
there's that kind of feeling there. And certainly when that does happen, that effect can be even stronger than wanting the favorite to win, but it totally can be 50-50. It's just an interesting one. Going to our last topic here, Steven's still up by 1 point. Diving back into those controversial at times UDisc methodologies. So Parker Welk had less than 1% chance of winning according to UDisc, only 2 shots off the lead going into the final day, while he was and I just said he was 2 shots off the lead. Is that a clear indicator that those percentages are a bit dramatic, or is it the perfect testament to the odds he ever came to win? I think those percentages get talked about quite a bit. Steven, what do you think?
So I'm going to ask you a question.
Okay.
You run that back 100 times. How many times does Parker Welk win that in that scenario, down 2 strokes to Calvin Heimberg? 1.
Mm.
1. With all the other players in the field, Parker Welk wins 1 time, in my opinion. And that's where I think you end up with that 1%. And so in terms of that, I think it's spot on. Now, realistically, sure, you may 5%, sure, maybe you can go that route. But I think you look at everything Parker had to do. He had to continue his momentum. He had to hit 80% of his circle 2 putts. He had to hit the circle 1 putts in the big moment, not crumble mentally, and hope that Calvin didn't match him shot for shot. He had to do all of those things had to come into play for him to win that tournament. And so 1%, while it seems super small, I think it's the right call.
Fair argument. I do a lot of times respect how blunt the percentages are, because it's like you'll see Kristen still have a 50% chance of winning down by 4, and it's like, well, she probably will. Brody, what do you think?
Yeah. So I mean, the 1%, it's 100 to 1, right? I'm figuring
1 out
that
of
math
100.
out right. What?
Well,
1 out of 100.
1 out of 100 chance.
No, I know, but I'm saying like if we're doing betting odds, the betting odds would be 100 to 1. So that would be like plus 10,000.
Something
Am I
like
doing that right?
Don't ask me. I'm not in
I'm
Vegas
I think
anymore.
so. If you bet $100, you win 10,000.
On 100 to 1 odds, yeah, it would multiply. $10 would 10 times 100.
No, 100.
$100
you bet
wins
$100.
10,000. Yeah, 100 times 100 is 10,000. I'm almost positive.
Yeah. You're
I
doing
think
your math correctly.
yeah. So doing that, I'm just saying. I think sometimes, with the UDIS thing, it's just a stat we all can look at. But like the money, like where people are going to put their money, that's really what it ultimately comes down to. And if Parker Welk had plus 1,000 or 10,000 odds, plus 10,000 going into the final round, you don't think people are hammering that? Sprinkling $25?
Well, sure,
$50,
but it didn't have plus 10,000. He didn't have those odds.
That's what I'm saying. I don't think he opens up. If there's actually money involved, if there's actually a casino or bookie doing the numbers, I don't think he opens up plus 10,000.
No.
Right.
No.
So that's where I think when there's money involved, I think the odds are a little bit more. Now, Kristen Tatar, like her odds, she was 71% chance to win before the tournament started. I think at this point she might be negative money going into tournaments. Right? Like,
yeah,
that's true.
Like you bet $100 to win 95.
Yeah.
Right.
Even worse than that.
Yeah, that to me might not be the craziest thing, but yeah, plus 10,000. I think I'm throwing some money on Parker, because it's like, why not? Like, there's a good chance. Like in my mind, there's a good chance that he might just pull it off, and then you make a crap ton of money. So that's where, to me, I think sometimes they take into account too much of like what have you done in the past, and not like what could you do.
Right.
And they're not on the safe side of things of where they're like, hey, we can't put out plus 10,000. People are going, people are gonna, someone's gonna come in and bet $1,000 on this, and all of a sudden now we owe $100,000 to someone. So, I don't. It'll be interesting to see what he opens up next tournament. And did you guys look at to see how it changed throughout the round? Because that to me would be really interesting.
I was
something that we
watching
could do.
I mean, they were favoring Calvin because
until the end.
Calvin had the lead for a long time there. Obviously there was the switch up down the stretch on 14 and so on. But they were favoring Calvin. I mean, pretty much all the way home.
I think that even after
Like heavily though, like was he like still single digits to win?
No, after hole 14 when Parker took the lead, I think it switched, but it still had Calvin at like over 35% chance to win even after that point.
Yeah, he still was pretty.
I have it right here.
It was big. Yeah.
So Calvin. Oh my gosh. You just sometimes, man.
Can you look at it hole by hole?
Yeah, but I can't tell what hole this is. Okay. Well, when Parker was 19 under, Calvin was 21 under, Alden was 21 under, and Matteo was 19 under.
Yeah, that was the beginning of the round.
Yeah.
No. Wait. Oh, that was okay. Oh, that's so weird. Why do they do that? Is that like a time thing? Okay, so the beginning of the round, they had Matteo and Alden basically locked in about 18%, and then Calvin was at 46. It wasn't until literally, I'm guessing that was hole 14 when Parker changed. Yep. So like at that point, Parker went super high. He went from a 7% chance to win to like a 48% chance. So like that switch.
Which is funny because if anybody should have a 0% chance to win, it should probably be Matteo. I mean, he can't win. So that's like as close to fact as we get. The percentages are interesting. In any case, Steven, you are a winner today, 16-15. Is that your first win, Steven? Second win. Okay, I
had the very controversial win over Robbie C. So
not controversial at all.
That's my guy.
I'll die on that hill.
Guy.
What do you have to say about your second career victory?
Well, some will say it's also controversial because there's only 3 of us today, but I take it a win's a win. And I'm again happy to be here and ready to add some more to that trophy case.
All right. Well, we are back in studio now. I am going to be gone next week, so who knows what debate night will look at like, though. So hopefully you enjoyed this for sure guaranteed present time episode, and we'll see you next time.